Did you know Americans spent over $14 billion on nose sprays in just 2024 alone? That's billions with a B, all for the simple, everyday problem of a runny nose. Crazy, right? Now, here's the big question. How many of us actually know how to treat a stuffy or runny nose the right way, without wasting money, and without making things worse? Most people don't, and that's why so many keep buying spray after spray, only to feel stuck in the same cycle. Here's the truth, a runny nose is one of the most common health annoyances in the world. Almost everyone gets it a few times a year. But here's the kicker, most of the sprays and drops we reach for don't really fix the problem. They usually just cover up symptoms, and in the long run, they can even make your nose crankier than before. So you end up lighter in the wallet and still sniffling. Let's take a little tour inside your nose. It may not seem like a very big space, but it's actually a maze of little passages and tunnels. All of these are lined with a soft, hard-working tissue called the mucous membrane. Think of it as a natural humidifier and filter in one. Its job is to warm and moisten the air you breathe, while also catching dust, viruses, and bacteria so they don't sneak deeper into your body. On top of that, those nasal passages give our voices resonance, so yes, you really can thank your nose for hitting that karaoke note just right. But what happens when you catch a cold or another viral infection? Your nose is the body's frontline defender, and it takes the first hit. The virus sneaks into that mucus lining, and suddenly you feel burning, heat, and irritation. It's easy to blame your poor nose for making you miserable, but what it's really doing is fighting for you. When the tissue warms itself to around 99 degrees Fahrenheit, about 37 Celsius, the heat actually slows down the virus, keeping it from multiplying and spreading further. At the same time, your nose ramps up production of thin, watery mucus. And that's when you start noticing the constant drip, the classic early stage of what doctors call infectious rhinitis, though most of us just call it a plain old runny nose. So here's what happens when your nose really starts to struggle. If that thin, watery drip stage doesn't do the trick, the mucus begins to change. It gets thicker because now it's carrying all sorts of extras, virus particles, immune system fighters, and even bacteria that were already hanging around inside your nose. At this point, what comes out isn't clear anymore. It turns yellow and sticky. Normally, your nasal lining has tiny hair-like brushes, doctors call them cilia, that sweep mucus along like little conveyor belts. But once the mucus becomes too heavy and thick, those cilia can't move it out. So the gunk just sits there, stuck, and bacteria find that warm, cozy environment perfect for multiplying. That's when the mucus turns green, sometimes with a pretty unpleasant smell. And when that happens, it's usually a sign that you've moved past a simple runny nose and now have a full-on bacterial infection. That's definitely the moment when you want to take it seriously. Now, something interesting also happens when your nose gets stuffed up, the tissue inside continues to heat itself. Since no cool air is passing through, the lining stays warm, which helps your body try to cook off the virus. Your nose is literally turning into a tiny sauna to fight the invaders. At its core, a runny nose is all about movement. When the lining of your nose can move and clear things out, you feel better. When it gets stuck, that's when problems start. So our job is to get things flowing again. And here's some good news, most runny noses clear up on their own in about a week, maybe 10 days. But let's be honest, walking around congested, sniffling, and sneezing for days isn't exactly pleasant. Plus, for some people, that congestion can lead to bigger issues like sinus infections or long-lasting irritation that sometimes ends up needing antibiotics. The number one tool to help your nose heal? Simple hygiene. If you keep your nasal passages clean and moving, you can shorten the life of a cold, prevent complications, and the best part, you don't have to spend a dime. One of the easiest and safest tricks is rinsing your nose with plain saline solution. Here's why it works. Making the mucus thinner and more fluid helps your nose flush out irritants, clear away germs, and get the lining back to its healthy rhythm. But here's a small but important tip: whatever spray or rinse you use, try to warm it to body temperature first. Even just holding the bottle in your hand or against your skin for a minute or two does the trick. When the liquid isn't ice cold, it passes through your nasal passages more comfortably and works more effectively. And yes, you don't need anything fancy. Saline solution is sold in every American pharmacy. You'll see it packaged in small squeeze bottles or larger containers. The bigger bottles often give you more bang for your buck, especially if you're planning to rinse more than once a day during a bad cold. Now let's talk about the magic of saline solution, and why it works so well. The version you buy in stores is what's called an isotonic solution. That simply means the saltiness of the liquid matches the natural salt balance in our bodies, about 0.9% sodium chloride. When you rinse with it, your nose's delicate lining doesn't swell, shrink, or get irritated. It just stays calm, moisturized, and able to sweep mucus along like it's supposed to. This gentle rinse thins out the sticky mucus, making it easier to flow out instead of sitting there clogging up your sinuses. But here's the key difference: you don't just drip in a few drops like you would with medicine drops. Saline is meant to wash the nose. That means using enough liquid, more than just a couple of squeezes, so it actually rinses through and clears things out. If you're buying bottled saline from the pharmacy, it's already prepared in a clean, safe way, and that's the easiest choice. You'll see small squeeze bottles or larger containers, depending on what you prefer. Some folks also make their own saline at home, which is totally fine as long as you do it safely. The recipe is simple: 1 teaspoon of table salt dissolved in a quart of boiled or distilled water. Non-iodized salt is a little gentler, but regular salt works too. Just be sure everything is mixed thoroughly, no leftover crystals, because undissolved salt can sting like crazy on your nasal lining. If you make your own solution, keep it in the fridge and only for about a day. After that, bacteria can start to grow, and the whole point of rinsing is to get rid of germs, not add new ones. So, fresh is best. There's also a stronger version called a hypertonic solution, that just means it has more salt, usually about 3 to 5%. This kind of rinse can be helpful if your nose is really swollen and congested because the extra salt pulls excess fluid out of the lining, helping to shrink the puffiness. But it can also be a little drying, so it's better to use it just once a day, while sticking with the gentler isotonic rinse the rest of the time. One last tip: don't use plain water for rinsing. It doesn't match the natural salt balance of your body and can actually irritate your nose instead of helping it. Stick with saline, and your nose will thank you. Here's something important: don't rinse your nose with plain water. It actually backfires. Because water doesn't have salt in it, your nose tries to fix the imbalance by pulling extra fluid into the lining. That leads to more swelling, irritation, and exactly the opposite of what you want. Saline, on the other hand, matches the body's natural balance and keeps things calm. One popular way to use saline is with a little teapot-shaped device called a Neti Pot. This method is ancient, it comes from traditional Indian medicine, but today it's recommended by ENT doctors all over the world because, honestly, it works. You can find Neti Pots in most American pharmacies or online, usually sold with pre-measured packets of salt. You simply pour warm saline into the pot, place the spout into one nostril, lean forward, tilt your head slightly to the side, and let gravity do the rest. The liquid flows through your nasal passages and out the other nostril, washing away excess mucus and allergens. Then you repeat the process on the other side. For people who deal with frequent sinus or throat irritation, this rinse can reach places sprays and drops often miss, including the very back of the nasal passages. Sometimes, if you lean forward just right, the solution can even trickle down toward your throat, and you can spit it out. That helps flush those hard-to-reach areas that sprays can't touch. Now, here's the one caution: the nose and ear are connected by a little hallway called the eustachian tube. If saline sneaks into that tube, it can carry bacteria into the middle ear and sometimes trigger an ear infection. So, if you're someone who's prone to ear problems, or you've had ear infections in the past, a Neti Pot may not be the best option. Gentle sprays or drops might be safer. And for kids, it's usually better to skip the Neti Pot altogether. Children's eustachian tubes are shorter and wider, which makes it easier for liquid to end up in the wrong place. For them, simple saline sprays are usually a safer bet. Still, when used correctly, a Neti Pot has one big advantage: the rinse happens without pressure. The solution flows naturally, which makes it less likely to irritate the nose compared to forceful spraying. For many adults, it can be a real game changer in keeping the sinuses clear. One thing I really want to clear up: those fancy saline sprays and nasal showers you see in stores. Many of them blast solution into your nose under high pressure, almost like they're trying to power wash your sinuses. Sounds effective, right? But in reality, that force can irritate and even damage the delicate lining inside your nose. Your nose isn't a sidewalk that needs a pressure washer, it's more like a fragile houseplant that thrives with gentle watering. The truth is, when your body is sick, it deserves kindness and patience, not harsh treatment. Gentle rinses are almost always enough for dealing with most cases of congestion or even ear-related issues. But of course, sometimes people reach for stronger stuff, and that's when we need to talk about decongestant sprays. These are the quick-fix medications you find on every pharmacy shelf. They work by shrinking the blood vessels inside your nose, which reduces swelling and gives you that wonderful, I can breathe again, feeling. And yes, they work fast. But here's the catch: your nose gets used to them very quickly. Doctors usually recommend no more than 2 or 3 days of use. If you have allergies, your time window may be even shorter before your nose stops responding. Overusing these sprays can actually cause something called rebound congestion. That means your nose feels stuffed up not because of the cold anymore, but because it's now hooked on the spray. It's like your nose gets into a cycle it can't break on its own. That doesn't mean decongestants are evil, they can be helpful when used responsibly. The trick is balance. Use them only when you really need relief, and don't lean on them every single day. And remember, they don't kill bacteria, they don't stop viruses, and they don't heal the nasal lining. All they do is buy you temporary comfort. Here's a smart tip: if you do use a decongestant spray, follow it up with a saline rinse once your nasal passage is open. That way, you actually clear out the mucus and germs instead of just shrinking the tissue for a few hours. And if your congestion has already turned into thick green mucus, that usually signals a bacterial infection. At that stage, your doctor may prescribe an antibiotic spray. But even then, if your nose is completely clogged, the medicine won't reach the infected area until you rinse things out first. Otherwise, it's like spraying paint on a closed door and expecting it to color the room inside. Here's something a lot of people don't realize: if your nose is stuffed full of thick mucus, no medicine, not even the fancy sprays or antibiotics, can reach where it needs to go. That's why rinsing with saline first is so important. Otherwise, you're basically spraying medicine onto a wall of gunk. It won't penetrate, and all you've done is waste money. Now, sometimes a simple cold drags on, and you develop complications like bronchitis or a sinus infection. In those cases, doctors might prescribe antibiotics in pill form. But even then, you can't forget about nasal rinses. Oral antibiotics don't easily reach the sinuses, especially the maxillary sinuses, the ones tucked under your cheeks. These pockets have thin drainage pathways, and when they get swollen or blocked, mucus just sits there like a puddle behind a closed door. Here's the tricky part: even after finishing a full course of antibiotics, if mucus is still trapped in those spaces, bacteria can survive. That's why some people feel better for a week, only to have the infection return like an unwelcome guest. It's not that the medicine failed, it's that the bacteria were hiding out in leftover mucus. So how do you make sure medicine, whether saline, drops, or even prescribed sprays, actually touches the right areas? It's all about positioning. If you just tilt your head back and drip medicine into your nose the way most people do, the liquid usually runs straight down your throat. At best, it treats a tiny portion of your nasal lining. The rest of the mucus-filled sinuses? Completely untouched. To get better coverage, doctors often recommend using what's sometimes called the head-hanging position. Basically, you lie on your back on a bed or sofa and let your head dangle slightly backward. Not flat toward the ceiling, but angled, like your nose is pointing toward the corner where the wall meets the ceiling. In that position, liquid can reach farther into the front sinuses and coat more of the nasal lining, instead of just sliding down the back of your throat. It may feel a little funny at first, but this trick makes sure your medicine or rinse actually goes where the infection lives. Without that, it's like trying to water a plant but pouring all the water onto the sidewalk instead of into the soil. So, let's talk about how to actually position yourself when you're putting drops or sprays in your nose. It might feel silly, but a little creativity with body posture goes a long way in making sure the medicine actually reaches the sinuses instead of just dripping down your throat. One option is to lie on your back with your head tilted slightly backward, not flat to the ceiling but angled toward that corner where the ceiling meets the wall. Another variation is to lie on your stomach and let your head hang downward, then add your drops. In either position, slowly turning your head side to side helps the medicine spread across the nasal lining instead of pooling in just one spot. There's also a kneeling position where you bend forward, point your nose downward, and then turn gently from side to side. Or, for a simpler method, lie on your side with your head tilted about 45 degrees toward your shoulder, and add drops into the lower nostril. Whichever you choose, the idea is the same: give gravity a chance to help the medicine reach more surface area. After applying drops, lightly press the nostril with your finger and take a few natural breaths in. Don't force it, though. Pushing too hard can break tiny blood vessels and actually make things worse. If it doesn't go in perfectly, that's fine. Even small adjustments in posture help the medicine coat more of your nasal passages. Now, about sprays. Here's the trick most people don't know: don't point the spray nozzle straight up your nose. Instead, angle it slightly outward, toward the corner of your eye. This way the mist spreads across the nasal walls instead of shooting directly down the middle and missing the areas where it's needed most. Also, don't jam the nozzle tight against your nostril, leave a little space so the spray can actually flow out. After spraying, take a few gentle breaths in to help it spread evenly. And remember, clean the tips of your sprays and dropper bottles after each use. They don't disinfect themselves, and if bacteria build up there, you're just reinfecting your nose every time you use them. Hygiene really is your best friend when fighting a cold. Wash your hands often with regular soap, not the antibacterial kind that promises to kill 99% of germs. Plain old soap and water works just fine. And when it comes to tissues, disposable paper is the way to go. Those old-fashioned cloth handkerchiefs? They're basically little bacteria storage units you carry around in your pocket. Stick with fresh tissues and toss them after use. One last piece of advice that often gets overlooked: keep the air in your home fresh. When someone in the family is sick, the air inside can become a little cocktail of germs and irritants. Opening windows for just a few minutes can drastically cut down the number of bacteria floating around. If you're worried about drafts, simply step out for a moment, crack the windows wide open, and then close them again once the air has changed. Remember, your nose isn't just there to smell dinner cooking or hold up your glasses, it's your body's very first filter against dust, allergens, and viruses. When you care for it properly, you're protecting your whole body. So, that's the story of your hard-working nose, the little filter that keeps you safe from dust, germs, and all kinds of invaders. Treat it gently, rinse it when needed, keep the air fresh around you, and most colds will pass without any drama. Small habits really do make a big difference. And hey, if you enjoyed this talk and learned something new about your nose today, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe for more health stories, and drop a comment with your questions or your own tips. I'd love to hear how you take care of your nose, or even your funniest, stuffy nose moments. Take care of yourself, stay healthy, and I'll see you next time.